Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into Richard Thaler's completely eye-opening book, Misbehaving. We're going to completely shatter the long-held illusion that humans are perfectly rational creatures who always make the most logical choices. Instead, we're going to explore how we actually make decisions and why traditional economics has been getting it so wrong for so long.
So, picture this. It's a real-world scenario. You desperately want to go to a huge concert, but you're struggling just to make rent and buy groceries, so you absolutely can't afford the ticket. Then, out of nowhere, your friend buys you that incredibly expensive ticket for your birthday. Now, strictly logically and economically speaking, you should immediately sell that ticket to pay for your basic necessities, right? That is the perfectly sane, rational thing to do. But honestly, ask yourself, would you actually give up the experience you wanted so badly? Most of us simply wouldn't. We'd keep the ticket. And that seemingly irrational choice is exactly what this entire explainer is about.
The myth of the econ.
To figure out why we stubbornly kept that concert ticket, we've got to meet a fictional species that traditional economists like to call econs. And the contrast between how economists see us and who we actually are is almost hilarious. Traditional models assume we're all econs, these super geniuses with infinite computing power, perfect willpower, and a Spock-like ability to rapidly optimize every choice for our own self-interest. But in reality, we're just human. We get tired, we get incredibly sentimental, and we're driven by inefficient, everyday routines simply because navigating life takes a ton of energy.
Now, Richard Thaler, who, by the way, studied under Daniel Kahneman, the author of Thinking, Fast and Slow, realized something huge early on. He saw that traditional economic models only work if people possess a completely unrealistic level of perfection. Think about it. Traditional economics assumes that for every single decision, you can instantly weigh every available option, perfectly analyze the data, and calculate the absolute best outcome. But humans just do not have the infinite creativity or the mental energy to process life like that.
Part 2. Humans actually misbehave. Let's step back into reality and see how actual humans completely dismantle these rigid models. Imagine you're at a party, having a great time, and there's this massive bowl of pistachios on the table. You catch yourself mindlessly eating them, so you physically pick up the bowl and hide it in the kitchen so you don't ruin your appetite before dinner. We've all done something exactly like this, right? It's just human nature. But to an econ, this behavior makes absolutely zero sense. Because an econ assumes that if you didn't want to eat the pistachios, well, you simply wouldn't eat them. According to strict traditional economics, deliberately removing an option from yourself is a total glitch in the matrix. The purely logical view is literally just, if you hide them, you're being stupid. But Thaler points out that this perfectly highlights our very real lack of perfect willpower. So here is the crucial takeaway. We misbehave. We definitely do not act like econs. We make choices based heavily on our intuition, our emotions, and our own subjective sense of fairness. If we feel a deal is fair, we'll buy it. If it feels unfair, we'll walk away, completely regardless of its strict mathematical value. And that means the foundational assumption of the perfectly intelligent, flawlessly rational human is fundamentally broken.
Part 3. The psychology of value.
Let's look at exactly how this irrationality messes with our money, specifically through a concept called loss aversion. Think about the multiplier, 2.5. Here's how it works. If someone hands you $1,000, you're going to be pretty thrilled. But if that $1,000 is immediately taken away from you, you don't just return to your normal baseline mood. The data actually shows you will hate losing that money 2.5 times more than you enjoyed getting it in the first place. Mathematically speaking, humans hate losing far, far more than they like gaining. And this intense loss aversion totally cascades into the rest of our lives. Because we have limited mental energy, we default to standard routines instead of constantly optimizing. We are so terrified of losing things, especially losing face or damaging our credibility, that we outright refuse to take perfectly rational risks. For a lot of us, the potential benefit of trying something new just isn't worth the perceived risk of failing and looking foolish to our peers. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but surely the stock market is a cold, calculating machine that punishes this kind of irrationality, right? Nope, even the stock market misbehaves. Markets can be incredibly trendy. For example, sometimes a popular branch of a company will spin off and suddenly be valued higher than the entire original parent company combined. That is mathematically impossible in a perfectly rational market, but it happens all the time because the market operates on human emotion, momentum, and subjective fairness, not just cold, hard math.
Part 4. The power of the nudge.
Since we've established that we absolutely cannot be Spock 24/7, behavioral economists came up with a massive game changer: the nudge. Nudging isn't about forcing people to do things. It's a helpful, ethical crutch. It's all about structuring the way choices are presented to help struggling, tired humans navigate complex systems safely, while still keeping their total 100% freedom to choose.
Take organ donation as a perfect example of how to design a better system. If you use a standard opt-in system, people are generally too lazy or busy to fill out the paperwork, so participation completely tanks. If you switch to an opt-out system, participation skyrockets, sure, but it can cause really difficult legal and emotional complications for families later on. But Thaler notes that the ultimate nudge is a prompted choice. When you go to the DMV, you are actively forced to make a decision right then and there. It turns out this prompted nudge creates drastically better results based on the science, without taking away anyone's personal agency.
We see this magic happen again with retirement savings. Expecting everyone to flawlessly calculate compound interest and voluntarily put money away every single month is just a traditional economics fantasy. Instead, modern systems use nudges like Pay Yourself Tomorrow, where a portion of your paycheck is automatically deducted into a retirement account. By simply making the smart choice the default choice, it creates drastically better financial security for everyone who lacks willpower in the moment. It is genuinely brilliant.
Part 5, a new economic science.
Ultimately, Thaler's big argument is that if economics wants to actually help people, the field itself has to evolve. It shouldn't just be based on solid-sounding logic made up by academics in a closed room, guessing how perfect people should act. Thaler argues economics needs to be treated like a hard science. Policymakers have to stop relying entirely on old axioms and start collecting real data through surveys. They need to test their hypotheses against real, flawed, everyday citizens to see what actually works on the ground. So, to wrap up Thaler's data-driven reality check, let's review the actual human heuristics, the mental shortcuts we use every day. First, our self-control is honestly pretty terrible, especially when we're exhausted. Second, our subjective sense of fairness dictates almost all of our spending. Third, an intense fear of embarrassment completely stops us from taking good risks. And finally, loss aversion governs our minds. We hate losing far, far more than we enjoy gaining. Once policymakers accept these raw facts, they can start designing systems that actually work for us. As we close out this explainer, I want you to look at your own life and the routines you've built. We've definitely established you aren't a perfectly rational econ. So ask yourself, where are you misbehaving? Where are you letting loss aversion or maybe a false sense of fairness hold you back? Really think about it. Where could a simple nudge completely change your trajectory? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer today, and keep questioning your assumptions.